September 7th, 1940. The sun sank behind the Thames as a low hum grew over the city, a sound Londoners had come to dread. Searchlights snapped to life, slicing the dusk, and then came the thunder. Hundreds of bombers filled the sky, blotting out the stars. Within minutes, the East End was burning. Warehouses along the docks erupted like volcanoes. Oil tanks burst, sending pillars of flame into the night. Firefighters raced through the chaos, men in helmets silhouetted against walls of fire. Water hoses hissed and melted in their hands. Civilians dragged buckets from the river. The air was thick with dust, smoke, and the smell of burning timber. In the underground, families huddled shoulder to shoulder, listening to the earth tremble above them. From Westminster to Whitechapel, the horizon glowed red. London had survived air raids before, but this was different. Systematic, relentless, merciless. It was not just a bombing, it was a message. Hitler's vengeance had come. The Blitz had begun. As midnight approached, the city was a furnace. Firestorms merged into a single inferno that stretched for miles along the Thames. Church bells rang in warning, but the sound was drowned by the roar of collapsing buildings. Fire crews worked until their boots steamed, their faces streaked with soot. Water mains burst. Streets vanished under rubble. In the glow of the flames, ordinary Londoners became heroes. A nurse carried patients from a collapsing hospital. Tram drivers evacuated their routes and joined rescue crews. A group of dock workers formed a human chain to save families trapped beneath debris. Above them, the bombers droned endlessly, the steady heartbeat of destruction. When dawn finally came, the city was unrecognizable. Smoke rose like ghosts into the pale sky. St. Paul's Cathedral stood miraculously untouched, its dome gleaming through the haze, a silent promise that London would not fall. As the raids intensified, life moved below ground. The London Underground became the city's second world. Tunnels transformed into sanctuaries. At dusk, thousands descended with blankets, radios, and tea. Families claimed the same platforms night after night, marking their spots with chalk. Children played beside the tracks, women knitted in the dim light. Volunteers served soup from tin kettles. Above, the bombs fell without mercy. Dust drifted through the tunnels, mingling with the scent of coal and candle wax. Yet below, laughter echoed. A man played the harmonica to calm the children. Couples whispered in the dark, holding hands as the world trembled above them. It was cramped, cold, and filthy. But it was life. Every morning people climbed back to the surface, blinking at the daylight, brushing off ash. The city above might burn, but beneath it, London's heart still beat. The Blitz turned London's fire brigade into a frontline army. Thousands of volunteers, men and women alike, took up hoses, shovels, and courage. They worked without rest, their faces blistered from the heat, their uniforms soaked and scorched. Whole districts burned at once. The East End, Southwark, Bermondsey, each a battlefield of flame. Water was rationed, pumps froze, engines jammed from debris. Yet the firefighters returned night after night, climbing onto collapsing roofs to fight the impossible. One reported, "We weren't putting fires out. We were holding the line." Their battle was one of endurance, not weapons. When bombs fell too close, they threw themselves flat, then rose again. They lost friends, stations, and sleep, but never their resolve. The war had many heroes, but few faced the enemy so directly. and none with less recognition. After the worst of the bombing, the royal car arrived quietly in the East End. The king and queen stepped out among the ruins, their shoes blackened by ash. They spoke to mothers standing in the rubble of their homes, shook hands with firemen, and comforted children still clutching gas masks. When reporters asked why the Queen refused to leave London, she smiled faintly. "The children will not go without me." The people cheered through their tears. For many, it was the first time they had seen hope embodied in a face. That day, the monarchy became more than a symbol. It became a family standing with its people. The visit reminded the world that Britain's strength was not in its walls or weapons, but in its unity. Beneath the smoke and ruin, the spirit of a nation still burned bright. By late September, the East End docks had become the Luftwaffe's favorite target. The Thames, once the lifeline of Britain's trade, was now a river of fire. Ships burned at anchor, cranes melted in their sockets, and whole warehouses collapsed into the water, hissing as they sank. The docks were more than industrial ground. They were home. Entire families lived in nearby rows of terraced houses. When the bombs fell, people ran not to shelters, but to help their neighbors. Dock workers formed rescue teams, pulling survivors from debris before joining the fire brigades. Reporters described the scene as a sea of flame and courage. Amid the smoke, rescue boats ferried the injured downriver, while barrage balloons swayed overhead like ghostly sentinels. London was bleeding, but it refused to die. The Luftwaffe's campaign stretched far beyond London. Industrial cities like Coventry, Liverpool, Birmingham, and Portsmouth soon joined the list of targets. Each night, the glow of burning cities could be seen for miles, a chain of fire across Britain. In some towns, bombs fell harmlessly in fields. In others, they found their mark. A single high-explosive strike could erase an entire block. Yet amid the destruction were countless miracles, bombs that failed to detonate, families who survived by seconds, or shelters that withstood direct hits. Civilians called them angels of luck. For every house destroyed, another stood untouched beside it, a strange lottery of fate that made each morning's walk through the ruins both terrifying and sacred. By October, Londoners had learned to live with the unthinkable. The sirens no longer caused panic. They signaled routine. People packed sandwiches before descending into shelters, joked about their evening entertainment, and pinned blackout curtains with practiced hands. Shops reopened between raids. Markets returned to bombed-out streets. Milkmen delivered their rounds through rubble, calling out cheerfully, "Any orders today, love?" The enemy's goal was terror, but it produced defiance instead. Each act of normal life became rebellion. Artists sketched ruins. Priests held services in the open air. Children played on cratered pavements as if nothing had changed. Britain's capital had transformed into something more than a city. It had become a symbol. On November 14th, 1940, the war reached a new horror. The medieval city of Coventry, heart of Britain's industry, was chosen for annihilation. Just after 7 p.m., more than 500 German bombers appeared over the Midlands. Within hours, the entire city center was gone. Flames consumed factories, churches, and homes alike. The great cathedral of St. Michael's stood as a skeleton against the inferno. Witnesses spoke of streets glowing white with heat. Ambulances could not enter. Even the fire hoses melted. By dawn, 600 people were dead, thousands wounded, and the city itself erased. Yet even amid the ashes, the survivors vowed to rebuild. From the ruins of Coventry would rise one of the war's most powerful symbols, not of vengeance, but of peace. The BBC became Britain's voice in the darkness. Each morning after the raids, radio broadcasts carried calm reports, messages of hope, and Churchill's defiant speeches. "We can take it," Londoners repeated, a phrase born in the smoke of the bombed streets. Reporters risked their lives to describe the destruction truthfully. Microphones recorded the sounds of bombs, fire engines, and crowds singing in the shelters. Across the Atlantic, Americans listened in disbelief. The courage of ordinary Britons became the story of the free world. In Berlin, Goebbels mocked Britain's stubbornness. In Washington, it inspired action. The airwaves had become a new front, a war of words and willpower. And in that battle, Britain was undefeated. December 1940. Snow fell on the ruins of London, turning the rubble white for the first time in months. Christmas came quietly, without trees or gifts, but with candles lit on broken windowsills. Families shared tea in bomb shelters, choirs sang carols in the underground. The raids didn't stop. Even on Christmas Eve, the sirens wailed. Yet there was no despair, only endurance. Volunteers carried food to those who had lost everything. Soldiers home on leave handed out chocolate to children. A small boy, asked what he wanted for Christmas, answered, "For it to be quiet." For one night, the city tried to forget the war. The glow of burning buildings mixed with candlelight, and the sound of hymns rose through the smoke. In those fragile moments, London remembered what it was fighting for, not just survival, but the right to hope. On the night of May 10th, 1941, the Luftwaffe launched its largest raid of the Blitz. More than 700 bombers descended on London in a single night. Incendiaries rained down like fiery snow. The House of Commons burned. Westminster Abbey was struck. The British Museum smoldered beneath a blanket of smoke. Firefighters fought through exhaustion, wading through rivers of molten glass and water. The air was so hot it melted street signs. And yet, amid the chaos, St. Paul's Cathedral stood once again, untouched, its dome gleaming against a sky of fire. By dawn, over 1,400 Londoners were dead, but the city still breathed. The next morning, Churchill visited the ruins and spoke only 3 words. "They will pay." It was the last great attack of the Blitz. The sky that had once brought terror now began to fall silent. When the bombing finally ceased, Britain counted its wounds. 43,000 civilians had died. 2 million homes were gone. Streets once filled with laughter were now fields of brick and ash. Yet amid the devastation, life went on. Trains ran. Schools reopened. Markets buzzed with rationed chatter. The government called it recovery, but for most, it was grief in slow motion. Mothers searched for missing sons. Fathers rebuilt walls by hand. Artists sketched the ruins, capturing beauty where only pain remained. But something deeper had been forged, an unspoken unity, a shared understanding that no bomb could destroy. Britain had endured the worst the enemy could unleash, and still stood tall. By mid-1941, the Luftwaffe's attention shifted eastward. The nightly wail of sirens that had haunted Britain for 9 months faded at last. Londoners woke to quiet skies and didn't quite believe it. Some still looked up instinctively at the sound of passing planes. Others couldn't sleep without the rumble of distant bombs. The silence was strange, too peaceful, too fragile. The war was far from over, but the first chapter of Britain's survival had closed. The people had learned something that no weapon could teach. that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to carry on despite it. Churchill called it Britain's shining hour, and for the first time in nearly a year, the morning air smelled not of smoke, but of rain. The Blitz left scars that would last for generations, but it also left a legacy of endurance unmatched in history. The photographs of London's ruins became symbols of defiance. The stories of courage became lessons for the world. As the war turned east, and later toward victory, Britain carried with it the memory of those dark nights, the firefighters who never slept, the mothers who soothed their children in the underground, the pilots who fought unseen battles above the clouds. When peace finally came, the bells of St. Paul's rang again. People filled the streets where once they had hidden. Children played in sunlight instead of shelters. The city that had burned now shone brighter than ever. The Blitz had tried to break Britain. Instead, it revealed what could never be destroyed: its heart.